Hello and welcome to this AlbaCon 2020 DMsGuild Roundtable. I'm Dave, one of the organisers of AlbaCon, which is an online charity role-playing convention. The convention is being held on the 3rd and 4th of October, with all money going to Is Good to Give, who are a charity that provide amazing support for young cancer patients and their families. You can find out more about the charity and obviously the convention at our website, which is www.albacon.co.uk. Sitting around this DMsGuild table, we have these awesome people. And I'm going to ask them each to say a little bit about themselves, with also a loaded question of what was the first product you worked on and what is your most recent product you've worked on. So I'm going to start in my top left with Mel.
Hi, I'm Mel Black. I live in Newcastle in the UK. The first DMsGuild product I worked on was the Uncaged anthology that Ashley Warren put together. And the most recent one that I worked on isn't actually out yet. It's out, it will be when this goes out. It goes out on pretty soon. It's called The Scientific Secrets of Icewind Dale by Zeke Gonzalez put that together. And I contribute a monster to that. I'm really excited about it. And that's me.
Excellent. Okay, I'll move over to my top right, Paul.
All right, hi. My first product that I made at DMsGuild, I created the Elven Bride and the Amber Petals. So nobody really knows about that until now, I guess. So I just made that because, oh, DMsGuild, let me put something here. And then forgot about it for like a couple of years. But the first one that really like got me into writing continuously is A Dragon's Breath. So it's an Adventures League module for level 1 to 4 adventures. And it basically involves a story about a ancient gold dragon. And then from there, started writing more stories, and there we go.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so we'll go to Matthew next.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, so what was it? Oh, geez. I'm trying to think about what the first thing that I got around was.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I think it's also the case with most people. Like, the first DMsGuild title is the one you kind of like hush under the rug. So for me, it was Cravenhall, which was like essentially like a setting agnostic sort of haunted village type thing. And then most recently, I worked on a Curse Classes Hamlet of Affliction, which has a lot of similarities to Cravenhall, but is tied into the sort of Curse Classes series. And yeah, that's pretty much kind of like I do mostly adventures. That's kind of what I'm known for.
Okay, cool. And we'll then move to Richard.
Hi there, I'm Richard Jansen Parks. Most people probably know my stuff through Winghorn Press, which is kind of the name I chose when I started putting things together. The very first thing I published on DMsGuild is an adventure called The Wild Sheep Chase, which I think was probably maybe one of the first 50 things ever put on the DMsGuild. It's free and it's getting on for something like 500,000 downloads, which is horrifying. It's something I put together in about 3 hours and is by far and away the most successful thing I've ever done, and it's horrifying. Oh, no. The latest thing I put together, at least that's available to buy, is an adventure called The Call of the Drowned, which is kind of a collaboration with Loke, Battle Maps, and their dungeon book of battle maps that uses the big book they've made, which I believe won the UK Games Expo Best Accessory thing last month. So that's rather lovely.
Excellent, excellent. Right, okay, can we keep moving clockwise, which obviously none of you know. Jason.
Hi, my name's Jason, and my first adventure was a bounty hunt where you had to hunt down a bandit leader called Nasher. I left the bounty hunt business for a little while, and I found that I really enjoy making them, and they sell pretty well. So I came back to it for Icewind Dale coming out. So I made it that you were hunting down a Wendigo, taking you from 10 towns through the Reghorn barbarians and then off out into the wildlands to hunt it.
Excellent. Okay, Allison.
Hello, I'm Allison Huang, also known as Draz on the internet or Drazillion on Twitter. I am an Australian Chinese game tabletop RPG maker. I also do a lot of art. I've actually been doing a bit more art on the DMs Guild lately. My first ever written project on the DMs Guild was also the Uncaged anthology. I haven't written a lot lately on the DMs Guild. Maybe my last one was Unbridled, but like I contributed art to Table for Two, which you might have seen, when this is recorded, the pick of the week on the newsletter, which is a bunch of one DM, one player adventures, and it might be out when this goes out, I'm not sure, but I'm also contributing as part of D&D for BLM, which is a charity zine that will be going on the Guild.
Nice.
Excellent. And last but by no means least, Josh.
Hi, yeah. I'm Josh Parry, better known, I guess, as JBC Parry on the DMs Guild. The first thing I ever wrote was a short adventure called Seeds of Chaos, which you can get for free. It was in August 2016. And my most recent release is Dragon Relics, which came out, I guess, earlier, a couple of weeks ago, maybe last month, which is a longer form campaign taking you from about level 1 to 12.
And it's all around the Anarok Desert, if that's how you
That's right. Yeah. Focuses around a dragon that's terrorizing the desert.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you all. So let's talk about DMs Guild. So this is open to whoever wants, and if there's 3 seconds of silence, I will randomly choose somebody. So what made you take the leap into self-publishing, and specifically with DMs Guild? Okay, I'm picking on Matthew.
Wait, who did you say? Did you say me?
I did see you, yes.
Oh no, that's the one. Wow. I to be honest, I don't know what it was. I was basically running like a kind of adventure for like my home game, and I made a fair sort of notes that I began to sort of tidy up, and then it's a case of like, I've tidied these up enough that I would like to kind of put it somewhere. And honestly, I don't know how I found out about the DMs Guild, but it just seemed like a natural sort of progression, because I was like, I've done something that I'm kind of proud of. I'd like to try and get it in front of more people. And yeah, just kind of threw it out from there. I don't know if it's the same for everyone else, where it's just more the case of like, you stumble across the guild and you're just like,
Yeah.
I guess.
I've got a note of that down here where I noted that it was where I went to for more content, and I found that after naturally being on it for like a year, just picking off random modules, it just felt natural for me to put my work there, rather than going elsewhere with it.
For me, it was very much a strange case of falling into it in a way. My day job, at least back in the day, was as a magazine, a journalist. So I happened to have InDesign and all these desktop publishing programs all already, and almost on a whim, when I had some notes, I thought, I'll put them in a layout. And I put that on the internet for free. And then I think 2 days later, the DMs Guild was announced. So I thought, hey, I have this stuff just lying around. Might as well put it up there and try and make some money off it.
I was actually going to ask, so obviously 2 of you being both involved in the Uncaged, how did the 2 of you find out about it?
Well, so for me, I had been like really like, because I was running a homebrew campaign, and I was like pillaging DMs Guild endlessly for like little bits of stuff, because I never had time to prepare. So it would be like, okay, there's an NPC, there's a village, blah, blah, blah. But I was always really daunted, and that's probably more me than the guild, but there didn't seem to be the type of content on there that I was super excited about beyond these little like bits of stuff. And then Paige Lightman, who's a genius and wonderful human being, and I love her forever, shared Ashley Warren's call for contributors, and she was like, you should all contribute to this, and she tagged all the women she knew who were involved in D&D, and I was like, fuck it. So I was like, okay, I was always really annoyed by the Harpy's origin story in the Monster Manual, and I was like, well, this won't stay how it was. So I just went through and I just sort of put this thing together, didn't really think about it. And then I got an email and I was like, oh, now I have to like do stuff. And my way of putting content together was so chaotic, because I have ADHD and I really struggle to do things in a way that other people can access. But the way that Uncaged was put together was really good because it provided me like, okay, this is how you do it. And then since then I found it a lot easier because I kind of had like a roadmap to follow. So that's kind of how I got into it, and then it helped me do a bunch of other stuff after that. I don't know if Allison, you found, probably it wasn't the same exact thing.
Yeah, it was similar because I also found it through Paige's tweet, except I don't know how it got onto my Twitter feed. Because, as you might have guessed from my bit of a slip up in my intro, I am a game designer. My degree in university is in video game design. So I very much come from that sphere. So like, adjacent. So there'll be a bit of crossover. But tabletop design is always something I've been interested in. But like, it wasn't something I had actually stepped into until I saw that tweet, and I was like, that could be interesting. Also, I've already seen that Ashley said that she has enough for 2 volumes, and I feel like whatever I write is going to be rejected because there's so many people involved. But I was looking through the monster manual, and I came across the Dryad entry, and the Dryad entry makes me so angry. So I was like, I'm just going to make create something and let's see how it works out. And I got accepted, and then I wrote my adventure. I went into the first volume of Uncaged, and suddenly there were people like praising it on Twitter and saying how innovative it was. And I was just like I guess this is my life now. And it kind of spiraled from there, really.
Excellent. Anything to add, Josh or Paul?
No, I think my story is pretty similar, to be honest, to what we've discussed.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, I'm part of a events group called the Greasy Snitches.
Yep.
So we a tabletop events group. So I found out that since we have Adventures League games on conventions, there's a program called the Community Created Content, or CCC. So that kind of makes you get more people to come to your convention if you premiere an adventure there. And it's like, you know what? Why don't I write something that, content that's not available right now in Adventures League? So I created one, which is a Dragon's Breath, which is basically I just want to show. Everybody will know now. I just basically want like a Disney kind of feeling in an adventure where you ride a giant dragon, appreciate the scenery, go to the sky, and, just have fun instead of just hack and slash. And yeah, from people like it and say they told me you can actually put the adventure in DMsGuild.
Yep. And
I did. A lot of people appreciated it, and all right, let's try to make some more, and which I did.
And your most recent one, Stygia Untamed.
Stygia Untamed, which, wow, I don't even know how it won a gold Ennie this year. So I really appreciate. I just want to write adventures that I think people haven't encountered yet, and then will appreciate. And so far, it's doing good.
Excellent.
I'm happy.
So, given the DMsGuild obviously gives you access to stuff that the SRD wouldn't normally just give you access to. So how do you make that tipping point between drive-through / self-publish outside of the DMsGuild world and put it into DMsGuild? How do you make that decision? Anybody?
I think for me, it was just a case of wanting to use the IP entirely. I think definitely when I first got into the DMsGuild, I was kind of naive as to what other marketplace options were. Everything I was doing was D&D centric. I'd heard about it. I was listening to podcasts every day, reading material every day. And so it was kind of just the logical progression. And, they do offer a lot for new publishers, all the art assets that are on there, as well as stuff that other people have contributed. I think it's a good place for people to start out, and it makes a lot of sense if you're already kind of moving in the D&D sphere.
I think the marketing and availability of it helps a lot, because people are going to go to DMsGuild before they go to Drive-Thru RPG for 5th edition content. Obviously you can still put 5th edition content on Drive-Thru, but your chances of someone randomly stumbling across it are going to be much harder without like external marketing. Like when you go in DM's Guild, you know, you have all the most recent releases, and someone might like see yours as it pops up and just decide to buy it, even if they've never heard of you before.
I've done that many times. So yeah.
I think
Yeah,
as well, there's a community around the DM's Guild, and I mean, there is around Drive-Thru RPG as well, but I just feel like, from my experience, people kind of like bump stuff up a lot more, and it's easier to find stuff within the DM's Guild community. It gets talked about, and I personally, other people might disagree, I haven't seen that in like Drive-Thru RPG, for example. There isn't like as tight a community. I don't know if that's just my experience, but that's what I found.
Is that because it's a single sandbox you're all playing in that sense? If you're on Drive-Thru, you're producing stuff for all sorts of different RPGs and worlds. So
I think there's also a certain amount of importance attached to just being able to use the words Dungeons and Dragons. You don't have to,
That's true.
You know, compatible with the 5th edition of a very popular role-playing game. Wink. So when people search for Dungeons and Dragons adventures, they don't search for, you know, fantasy adventures that may or may not feature IP from Wizards of the Coast. They search for Dungeons and Dragons, D&D adventures. We'll just say this is a D&D adventure. After on the front cover, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. The importance of that you can't really underestimate.
And obviously leaning into like the IP, as kind of Josh said, is you can make content that is kind of like adventure adjacent, which what some of the hardcover books are kind of quite good at is they leave a lot of story threads. And for designers, it's quite easy to sort of grab a story thread and flesh it out into a whole adventure, a whole encounter, or whatever it is, that people at the table, like DMs who don't have enough time, can be like, oh, there's this tower that they describe, but there's no information about it. DM's Guild, there's, you know, a few people who have kind of filled out that, and there you have something that you can just slot straight in as if it's like part of the hardcover.
Yeah, and I think in DM's Guild, it's more funneled since it's just one system, which makes it easier for the customers to purchase the product that they want. So like what Matthew said, so if you have a story thread about vampires, in Curse of Strahd, I want to add some more, I put it in DM's Guild, then you see easily all the Curse of Strahd related adventures and products. If you go to Drive-Thru, start to search for some vampires, then you will also see results for different systems. And that kind of makes it harder for the customer. Like it's plus one more step. Yeah. Makes it difficult.
Yeah. Jason, did you have something to add there?
Just the exact same as Paul, really. As an audience, it's someone who was previously using it to try and find content. Coming from a Dungeons and Dragons perspective, it was really easy to just go on there and find exactly what I wanted. Whereas going through Drive-Thru RPG, there's just a whole other level to it where suddenly you're seeing whole other systems and it's very easy to get distracted. Whereas when you're in DM's Guild, it's concise.
Sorry, Allison.
I also want to say that, like, when you start to do SRD content or OGL content, it's like you think, oh yeah, I'll just do this legalese and it'll be fine, until you realize, oh wait, that spell's from Xanathar's, you know, that magic item isn't, you know, in the SRD, and all of these little things just kind of add up when you realize, oh no, I need to reword that if I want to use that in a stat block. And you don't have to really care about that stuff when you're publishing on the DM's Guild, because you've got the IP, you have access to it.
Okay. So you're producing content to publish on DM's Guild. Suppose, how do you make sure that it's visible? You know, how steep is that entry point to say, right, my product is there, people please buy it? How much of that is to do with art? How much of that is to do with timing of release? And even price point.
I think obviously both Josh and obviously Richard being one of the first 50 people to get a product on the DM's Guild. It's changed a lot, and I think even in the year that I've kind of been there, you can see that like from something on the new page or like the new list, it would be on there for maybe a day. Now it is a matter of hours, like with how much sort of new content's being, which is fantastic. You know, the sort of influx of like new authors. And the sort of the best selling, you can definitely see that there has been sort of like an uptick in both, I guess, production quality. And again, if you look at the top best selling things, a lot of them are collaborations. They're not, you know, solo projects. So what I always think is if trying to get a first thing out there, like, first and foremost, hire an editor, and slowly, bit by bit, just involve more people if you can in the project. And just by nature of having more people in it, it's easier to get more buzz because you have more people doing promotion. Obviously, art and covers can do a lot. And especially, again, finding an artist who, you know, kind of... Anyway, so please, someone save me, I'm drowning.
Finding an artist that matches what you're trying to achieve, is that where you're trying to go with that? Or is
yeah, I think, yeah, it's about finding, you know, an artist whose styles you appreciate, and obviously being kind of explicit about what you kind of want, and obviously, first and foremost, being, again, I think there's a trend for artists as well to be work for royalty percentages. So obviously looking at like art as a sort of thing, saying, oh, for my first project, I can't really necessarily afford that. But there are, you know, there are artists and who can sort of, you know, say, okay, well, rather I would take like an upfront cost, but then also a certain percentage of the royalties. And that's a way of, you know, getting incredible art and things like this, you know, things that slowly but surely kind of eke up the production quality, I think.
As someone who is an artist and someone who's done art for a lot of anthologies and collaborations, I definitely agree with that, because if you're just like wanting to make an adventure and you want to commission a cover and some spot art maybe, like it's the way, and then like especially if it's your first time, and an artist might not want to like invest in your product, because obviously if you're paying purely for royalties, then the artist has to like make a gamble on whether you'll actually sell anything, so they'll get, you know, some money back. But with collaborations, it's a lot easier for artists to go like, oh yeah, I'll just do a 1 piece or 2 pieces of art, it'll be good for my portfolio. I know that like maybe this won't sell too well, and if it, you know, because I might only get like $10 back from it, but because it's a collaboration, because it's more of a group effort, you know, it feels like the chances of it selling are much better, and the chance of, you know, having like the marketability of a group project is, you know, much better from the get-go as well.
Yeah, for me, there's like 2 things there. So if you're just putting a product in DMsGuild, they talk about art, but I'm more focusing on the cover art. I think, again, from the audience, for customer standpoint, when you go to the website, when they see the cover art, that's their hook. All right, this looks nice. This looks like an anime adventure. This looks like a Call of Cthulhu related adventure. So I'll click on that. And then, so that's the hook that you get. And if you're new to publishing in DMsGuild, art is not going to be cheap, especially if you want really good art, has to be worthy of your work. It's going to cost you. And if you're just starting out, it's going to be a bit difficult. But the technique to get past that is to get stock art. There are also free art in Wizards of the Coast art in DMsGuild that you can get for free. You can start with that. It's not going to be as pretty as the ones that the artists are making, but that's the start. And then from there, I go to point number 2, is to build your name. Because when you start out, you see these bestsellers right now. If you look at that bar, that line, that strip, those are people that you know already most of the time, especially if you create products in DMsGuild. And they have a following already due to collaboration. So yeah, more followers. But if you start creating good product, they go for your cover, they see that, oh, I like this, I like the concept of the adventure, I run it, I like the supplement, I like the subclass. And then you start to build a following. And then when you release a product, again, then they say, oh, it's written by Paul Gabat. And when you post it on Twitter, it has a nice art. It's not just a white page. Okay, let me check it out. And then from there on, you get more sales, and then you continue doing it. And then it just escalates, and you get better results over time.
I would also say, sorry, about if you are starting out, it can be incredibly daunting, and all the questions you asked, David, about like what do you do about the price point, when do you even release it, like what on earth do I do? If you kind of keep an eye out for collaborations that are coming up, you don't have to make those decisions alone. And I think there's really something to be said about, yes, okay, making your name, but also it doesn't have to be just like a leap off a cliff. It can be like a gentle step out, and
Slowly.
from there things snowball, and you think, oh no, actually I think I could do this on my own now because I've seen how it works. And I think that's the really nice thing about DMsGuild, is that it can bring, and like other sort of self-publishing, is that there isn't like a set way to do it. If you feel like, okay, I don't feel like I'm ready to do something just on my own, there are a bunch of other people who feel like that as well, and you just have to find them. And that's naturally, you build a community, you build a name, and then anything you do decide to do on your own is better. And I think that's a way of doing it. You don't just have to get lucky and put something out that everyone loves. You can kind of work slowly to build up, and that's valid too.
I mean, to kind of add on to that a little bit, is you don't have to look much further than the RPG Writer Workshop by Ashley Warren, which is the idea of like, it is creating a project by yourself, but you have this community of so many people in the exact same situation as you, and so many sort of incredible authors kind of stem from that sort of graduated, I guess, as year by year. But then I think one thing as well, especially when it comes to like if you are like looking at like selling things, I think like it's a little bit cliche, but the best way to sell a product on the DMs Guild is sometimes to release a different project, or just like each time you release something, you kind of slowly, bit by bit, you get an uptick on your previous projects. And it's just a case of like, just keep running, and eventually you look back and see kind of how far you've gone.
Yeah, because I suppose building on that, so Richard, you mentioned earlier about Sheep Chase, and that's still selling now, isn't it? I mean, I know it's a free product, but it's still having downloads now. Is that because it's free, or is that because of momentum?
I think a lot of luck and a lot of momentum. It's one of the first things that was out for the site. It was free. Because in hindsight, I really wish I was charging like $50 for that, because I'd have a lot of money now. But here we are, such is life. And it's got very lucky with Google searches. So if you search for, good free D&D adventure, which is not an uncommon search, it comes up right near the top. And I've gotten fairly lucky with that. But yeah, I think an awful lot of it is from momentum, and that sort of trickles down to all of my other stuff that people do have to pay for, and that perhaps hasn't been seeing quite so much of the limelight.
Okay. Right. So we're talking about collaboration quite a bit. It's come up several times, which I kind of figured it would, having looked at your back catalogs. When you come to actually decide what you're making, or if you're going to lead a collaboration or get involved in a collaboration, does it matter what it is? Is there something you're drawn to? Adventures, classes, magic items, traps, whatever it is, all the various tropes of a D&D universe. Are you drawn to something in particular?
If it's because I'm an adventure writer, I think like I need to see like the pitch usually on Twitter and be like, oh yeah, if I were to join this, what ideas would I have? And if I can't think of something like immediately, like within the first 24 hours, I will probably either like decide not to join, or because I have the benefit of also volunteering my art services. Because if I don't have that immediate like idea, then I don't trust myself to have the motivation to really like produce something that I really enjoy, but also something that like, will be part of a bigger project, and that like will probably have a fast turnaround, because obviously once you've committed and you're in the project, you want to like get that done. You can't, you're on someone else's deadline at that point.
Okay. Anyone else?
When making collaborations, I realized, because until recently, I kind of make products on my own. But I realized that when you say a D&D writer, it doesn't cover all of the aspects of D&D, meaning magic item classes, subclasses, and the adventure itself. Because I just come to a realization that, wow, I'm really bad at writing magic items. Like, I don't know how to balance it. I don't know how. And then I see people like posting it like in the first 30 minutes after I ask, how do you do this kind of magic item? And they have it. They know how to balance it. And it's worded really nice. And that person actually knows how to do it. So if you collaborate with that person together with writing adventure, which what I focus on, and then someone create a background for it, and then a subclass, and then you have this whole product of everything you will need in a D&D campaign, adventure, and so on. So that's what I look for in a collaboration, something that who's the expert on this, who's the expert on that, and are we gonna jive, are we gonna be in sync, connect on if we work on this project? And if it's a yes, let's do it, let's finish it.
I agree. So I look for people who do stuff that I cannot. I'm really terrible at visual stuff. Anything I try to make look nice, it does not. So I look for that aspect, but I also look for people who can produce stuff that's different than stuff that I could produce by virtue of sort of their background and sort of their life experience. Because if I was like excited about a project and then saw, oh, it's all just, white cis people, I'd be like, well, that's great, but what am I really adding to this that isn't already kind of there? And that's a really reductive way of like explaining it, but I just like projects where there's like all aspects of life and experience, because I feel like that to me makes gameplay feel like more real, because it's a world of everyone's experiences all being thrown in. And so like for me, that is an aspect. Like, does the idea excite me? Obviously that's the first thing, and then who else is excited by it and also in to collaborate, who am I going to be working with, and it means I've kind of gotten to connect with some really amazing people, which is kind of a side benefit, as well as the work being produced, I feel, being better for it. So that's the thing I look for.
I think looking across it, I think we're all adventurers, aren't we?
Yeah,
I think so.
Probably, yeah.
So I think it's a case of like subclasses.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to, we've told, so we made the reference to, I don't know how to write magic items, Paul, right? So if you then talk about, you don't know how to design monsters, don't know how to design traps, don't know how to design that, having that access to a wider community, whether it's by looking for who has done things in the DMs Guild already that you like and appreciate, or those random Twitter shout-outs that happen to attract attention, there is a community aspect to this. As creators, I'm assuming that's a big part of it for you. Yeah? Okay, lots of nods. Right, okay, so when you're creating something, how much of your time is spent playtesting it? I mean, obviously in the case of something like a CCC, Paul, that gets played at conventions naturally, but other stuff, does it get playtested? Do you use it in your home game? I know, Josh, you run pretty much everything you publish in that format, don't you? You do it as a home game first.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that probably is just force of habit more than anything else. The original adventures I published were things that I just run, collected the notes, wrote up properly, and then published. So I think that's kind of just become part of my process. But I would definitely encourage people. I think it depends on the product. I think adventures you can have a bit more leeway with, but definitely subclasses, magic items, monsters, stuff like that, I would probably suggest needs more rigorous playtesting, because depending on the type of DM, people can get kind of het up about whether the maths is exactly as they deem fit. But I think playtesting probably is still one of the things on the DMs Guild that maybe distinguishes DMs Guild publishers from full third-party publishers who have a team of playtesters that they'll send their work out to. You know, if you look at a lot of the big Kickstarters, you'll see, well, you know, they've got a playtester list that goes on to the sometimes hundreds, right?
Yeah.
And my impression, at least, is that releases on the DMs Guild are not quite as patient. I think a lot of the time we write something and we're desperate to get it out as soon as we can. So we'll play test it once with our home group and maybe send it to a friend to read and then get it on there. Whereas maybe it's an accountability thing, but Kickstarters tend to be more rigorous, I guess, with the playtesting. But I'm not necessarily sure it matters. It's a lot of what we do is digital releases, right? So if someone comes to you with feedback saying, I ran this and everybody died in the adventure within the first encounter because this is CR 10 and you've said this adventure is for a first level party.
Oh,
well,
no.
you know, you could just update the product, right? And then include a little note saying, I messed up on this. I've had some feedback and I've changed it a bit. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a different ball game, I think, most of the time.
I would echo that with, I run a group of young people. It's part of a kind of community group that I run, and it's mostly 12 to 14-year-olds. So I like to play test some of the adventures that I've ran with an adult group and then bring them to the kids. And what I always find is the diversity in ideas is so far-ranging, and it's even made me realise that some of the magical items that I've cooked up for the adult group, they were fine with. They were just wanting to keep it in their backpack. The kids are suddenly using it and breaking the game with it. So I like that kind of creativity. I would always say if you can get two groups that are completely different in age or in any way, you'll find that they come up with different ways of interacting with your adventure or objects that you've got.
See, it's a curious thing for me when I've been playtesting things. I found there's been less concern about a balance as such, right? So this is about adventures and more about the usability. Even when you send it to a good editor, sometimes you'll get to the table and realize, oh, I need these two things to run this encounter, but they're on two different pages. I need to find out a way to make sure they're all on the same page, that things flow in a way that isn't just usable when you're reading it, but also being used as a game product. I think that's an interesting thing that occasionally we forget, is that the things that we write for games aren't, just stories or just pieces of writing. They're tools to be used at the table. And it's amazing how often in playtesting I've come back and not felt the need to change anything in terms of balance or plot, but just this needs to be arranged in a way that is more user-friendly at the actual table.
I think that's a huge challenge generally, because I've bought, the Wizards of the Coast adventures and found myself with like 4 different bookmarks for one encounter because I'm flipping back and forth. Like it's not an easy thing to do. But I think by virtue of DM's Guild, like no one's, unless it is a collaboration, no one's waiting for your thing specifically on a deadline. It's nice to be able to play with that and like go away and give it to someone and they come back and go, what is this? I needed these 3 things and they're on like 7 different pages. It's nice to have that kind of feedback, and you can take your time and like rejig and stuff like that. But it is a challenge to make things not only coherent in terms of story, but usable as like a product.
Because I think because these things are, for a better phrase, they're technical manuals, aren't they? They're not prose, they're not fiction. They'll have fictional content, naturally, but they are technical manuals that you have to follow to a greater or lesser extent when you're running the game. And so it may read well, but I suppose the point you're all making is that actually using it in anger, it becomes a very different kind of beast, doesn't it? So.
Right. And again, playtesting makes your products better. That's it. A new writer mistake, and I admit I've made it several times, is that when you write something, you assume that, what I've done is something great. I like it. I think this will sell well. And then once people start playing it, what is this crap? What did you have here? Like a Dragon's Breath, which is like my best-selling adventure now in DM's Guild. When I play tested that with my friends, close friends, I said that you get to a dragon's. There's a room full of treasure, and you get a pure gold sword. And like, wait, what? It's made out of pure gold, so it's malleable. So when you get hit, like it bends. What? So it's a crappy item then. And I'm like, yeah, it's pure gold. It looks nice. And then what? That's stupid. And then another mistake comes one after the other, and they criticize the whole 4-hour adventure until it made me stop writing for 2 months, and made me realize,
Wow.
like, am I doing bad things? Am I writing this wrong? And then I put all their inputs together, their feedback, write it again, and then look at that. Because of that playtest, if they haven't done that, there will be a lot of pure gold swords out there right now.
It would also be very heavy as well, I'd imagine as well.
I guess, yeah. And it's a good, so playtesting, yeah, I can't specify it enough. Playtesting is very important. The more you do it, it's an added chore. But the more you do it, the product becomes better. I'm very guilty of inflicting playtesting on unsuspecting groups at cons, just because I'm getting, I've got a group of people that I playtest things with pretty regularly, and sometimes dumping a new adventure on a party of complete strangers. They will do things that your home group would never think to do, that crack the entire adventure over their leg and snap like a twig, and you think, oh dear. But yeah, it's a learning experience.
I think kind of you kind of subconsciously design for the parties you run for.
Yeah.
I think it's just because that's kind of your comfort zone. And when you kind of get playtest feedback, I think that there's a balance, because obviously I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase it. It's like sometimes like the feedback from a certain playtest could just be, okay, well, this is almost like that particular table or that particular, and to bend over back, like not to, well, what's the best way to phrase it? Is that sometimes you kind of like, if the players are just like, okay, well, I had one player who was asking all this information about this particular NPC's backstory, who you've given, like, let's say a paragraph to. You could, based on that feedback, have like 3 pages. But I think there's a fine line of like being able to trust the DM. And sort of, to sort of say, okay, well, this is what I'm providing. Again, when it comes to contact with the players, it's the DM. You can, you have control to sort of wiggle it however.
That's definitely the fine line with adventures, which is always a very fun, because like as a DM myself, I'm very improv heavy, and adventures are very not improv heavy, because you need to write the structure, and you need to figure out what happens if things go wrong. So like my style was just like a complete 180, and there was this big thing of like, okay, what do I actually need to write down, and what should I just be like, oh yeah, the DM can handle it? And it's definitely interesting, and why ideally you should also have your adventures play tested by another DM. It's not a luxury that's often available, because it means that you have to get someone else and have that other person also have a party. But like the fact that when someone buys your adventure, you can't be in the room to explain your decisions. Yep. You're out of the equation the moment that you've sold the adventure, and you need to make sure that works without you there.
Very much so, very much so. I think going back to something you said, Matthew, about that kind of iterative need to tweak and constantly add things. I've got a friend who's a board game designer who's had a board game, and he's published 3 other board games since he started working on this first one, but he's on his 50th iteration of this board game, because he keeps playtesting it at conventions and other events, and he keeps tweaking it, and it's just like, yeah, it's now a completely different game than what it was originally. So it's, if you have the idea and you can execute the idea, and you work on the assumption that the DM has to have narrative control at some point anyway. So that kind of has to go with it. Anyway,
I think if I
I
can,
won't name him because he'll shout at me.
I think something that's also important is, if you can, is to provide like post-release support. So if you have your own Discord server, or even if you're just kind of like willing to field questions on Twitter, it makes a big difference, because people can then come to you and say, you know, my group is actually of 8 players, or they can say, oh, I'm actually kind of running this a few levels higher than maybe I should be, or whatever. And I think if you can be there, that makes a big difference for people, so that you can just advise them how you might change things for their own groups.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes DMsGuild and Drive-Thru RPG great, because on every product, there's like a discussion portion. So if you have any questions when you purchase this product, or even if you didn't purchase it, you can write a comment and say, how do I run this if this happens? Or if that is this really how you interpret this magical item? Then you can reply, and then other people who have purchased that product can see that conversation as well. And that's good. So that means for a creator, make sure you reply to those. Okay, that's basically it. Don't ignore it.
I was something about feedback as well, and this is isn't something I even thought about until Paul's comment, where he said he got this feedback and it made him like really like, oh, I don't even want to work on this anymore, because because I work in advertising, and so we get really harsh feedback all of the time, and so I'm quite good at dealing with it. But really, what I want to say about feedback is that there's sort of constructive, useful feedback, like you've got a stat block in there that's for a creature that doesn't even exist in the adventure. That's good feedback. Oh shit, I messed up, I'll change that. And then there's stuff that I've also had, which is there's too many lesbians, and I'm like, but you just don't like that, and that's fine. that isn't an error with the product.
No, it's not.
Opinion. And I think it's really important.
That's why I just add more lesbians.
Yeah. The next adventure is only lesbians. There isn't even a plot, it's just lesbians. No, so I think it's really important with feedback to kind of be able to filter out, okay, is this just an opinion of something they like or dislike, or is this something that I can make better? And those are really extreme examples, but that is a really good skill, and I think it is something you just develop over time. I don't think it's something you can just learn, but when you get feedback, is this an opinion that A, is, everyone's going to share, unlikely, or is it B, an error or an unbalanced thing or something that just doesn't work that I can fix? And I think that's the 2 main types of feedback, and I think it's really important to be able to distinguish those.
And when you get feedback, you need to also understand that they might not have the vocabulary to articulate why they're having a problem. So sometimes you need to figure out, like, is this itself a problem, or is there an underlying problem that's really the thing I need to fix?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, and this is just for playtester feedback, not yet from your editor. When your editor starts talking to you, I'm gonna start crying.
You see, I think anytime like I get the edits back, it does take me a few days to be like, okay, I'm in the right mindset to go through and see how they've torn apart all the sentences. But
writer's pain.
Yeah.
But so we've talked about, or we've referenced Ashley Warden's RPG Writers Workshop a couple of times actually. And I think it's that entry point of, right, so where do you start? I mean, obviously there's various tools and PDFs available on the DM's Guild to, this is what you can access, it tells you what you can do. But where do you start,
Firstly, I just want to mention that I am incredibly biased because I moderate the Discord for the RPG Writers Workshop, and in the most recent workshop, I contributed writing as an instructor. So yes, I do think that it is a good point to start, but I have an investment in it.
Sorry, Jason.
Sorry. Cheers. I would recommend the Discord because there's a great resources part to the RPG Writer Workshop Discord, and it's been so helpful. And even just finding royalty-free images, for instance, because I don't have the money to pay for images at the moment. So even just like stencils, layouts for you to use as well, and it's. Even I'm starting to notice on that specific one little bit that it's even becoming like a kind of testing ground for people to put their layouts for using in, say, like Affinity. People are mentioning when things are down in price for writers. I can't say how much actually that one little part of that Discord has helped me.
Also, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alison, I'm sure you will, isn't there a creative opportunities bit in that?
Yeah. There is a creative opportunities channel. There's also a collaborations channel. So the creative opportunities being like, I need an artist, I need a layout, an editor who is available, I will pay you. And collaborations is like, hey, does anyone want to work with me on this? For royalty share, obviously. So like, there's two channels for that, and they have different vibes to them depending on like if you have the financial capability and like if you're going into it as a partnership or more as a like I need to commission something.
And I think that kind of, I've never done RPG Writers Workshop, but I just know that there is that, because creative opportunities and like any kind of group you have where people are highlighting, hey, this is a thing. That's how I got my first Adventures League gig.
Yeah.
So like that, it's such a good thing that kind of thing exists, whether it's RPG Writers Workshop or something else. If you have a community where people are flagging creative opportunities to you, it can be, because the kind of thing where I did Uncaged Anthology on a whim, and then it kind of started this huge snowball of like all this other work I've gotten since then that I would just never have gotten. I guess start anywhere and just make sure that you keep going after you've gotten your first step.
Yeah. And also one of the most active channels is probably the promotions channel. So like having the space to like an extra space to promote your stuff as well as like on Twitter or like on other channels or like Reddit or whatever is always good, because like the more places you can share your adventure like or other writing, the better, really.
Yeah.
And like obviously since there's a community build up already, then like people will notice your stuff because they'll be like, oh yeah, hey, I've seen you around the Discord, I'll check out your stuff because I've now built a connection there.
And sometimes, I've been an instructor with the RPG Writer Workshop as well. They will, you get people who come out the other end saying, I really enjoyed your lesson. Would you take a read through what I've written and stuff like that? And I think building those connections is also a good way to kind of give yourself the confidence to publish that first thing. Because I think it means a lot to people to just talk to someone else about their work and just see whether they can get someone else's opinion on it. So I think it's one of the best if you're going to start publishing, it's one of the best ways to do it.
And like another thing is that like networking and like building a community is so daunting when you're new. So that like to have a community where everyone basically there is new or like has recently started out, that's really useful because everyone else is in the same situation you are, rather than you like being on Twitter where like famous people are getting like lots of retweets on their thing and you're just you only have one or two and they're from your friends.
Which is nice, but at the same time, it's not the same thing.
You don't appreciate friends. It was nice to film it.
Thanks, Mum.
Thanks, Mum. My mum's not on Twitter. That's a good thing. We've talked about the RPG Writer Workshop. But if let's say you don't know that exists, which you should, and we will obviously be including links to that in the various show notes. Is there anything else that you should do before you enter into this sphere of writing for DM's Guild or whatever?
I was going to say, obviously across the table, potentially, I think most of us, we kind of all came from like different sort of starting points. So I guess it's the adage that there's no real wrong way to go about it. I think it kind of depends on like if to get your foot in the door, you want to join a collaboration first to sort of build that confidence. If you're the type to sort of toil away in silence, into the late hours and then sort of emerge with I think it's just being prepared to sort of do what you need to do to get that sort of first step out there, and then it gets easier. The first step is always the hardest, and if at the very least building building at least one or two connections, like again, an editor, maybe. Just, just like, you may think you don't need one, but it's just nice
I feel
to
like
have.
you've been scarred in editing because you mentioned
No,
editor.
well, here's the thing. If I've been scarred, it's like Stockholm syndrome, because I will always get an editor. So if they've broken me, they've done it in the right way.
Right, okay. They've trained you well, basically.
Yeah, and it's a case of just even just by the nature of just having someone to be like, okay, this is what I've done, and they kind of look at it for just the grammatical errors. But some editors, they pick up on the larger thing, and then from there, you build a relationship, and then. So yeah, I guess back to my earlier point. I hope that's right. But there's not really any wrong way to do. You just do.
If you don't have any access to a writer's workshop, like for me, I write because I want to make myself happy first. I want to put what I want, but will make me happy, and then after I do that, I realize that there are similar people with similar interests that likes the thing that I do. But if I'm gonna publish something as a new writer or creator for DMsGuild, I will watch videos, hopefully like this one, where like how to start writing, or even just for fictional novels, Chris Perkins and other Wizards of the Coast videos and other third-party videos as well. And there's a lot of things that you can learn. Oh, okay. Because when I started, I don't know that you need to hire an artist, that editor, that there's someone who does a layout. Like, I thought it was just white page, and then that's it. You type in words, and then you publish it. And then you start to discover that there are just several tools that you can use by just watching videos, and then they will link you to like other resources, either through Twitter, through Facebook, through Reddit. And then from there, you start to build your own web until you absorb as much as you can. You do your product, you play test, and then publish it, hope for the best, and there you go.
I think what I was going to say was similar to that, which is sort of get involved in D&D, like however is best for you. So if it's not going to your sort of local gaming store and doing like game night, it might be like joining the like Facebook groups, or like getting involved and talking to people on Twitter. Just get to know people and sort of what they might want, and what you kind of notice, oh hey, there's a trend of like people always looking for this and I haven't seen it on the guild, or I've only seen a couple of bits, maybe I could do that. And just sort of immerse yourself in like D&D and what people want and what people are saying. And like Paul says, you might find new resources, or people to work with, or you might just find stuff that people really want that doesn't seem to exist. And hey, that's your opportunity. That's where you could start and just say, I did this. Like, it plugs the gap. It doesn't have to be amazing, but if no one else is doing it, it's the best there is right now. So that's a great place to start too.
And that may result in a catalyst for other people to do it, and then it may result in something else for a collaboration in the future. It's that momentum aspect, isn't it? Again. Okay. So Adventurers League's come up a couple of times. Is the structural part of how their adventures are written actually a good tool to learn how to write adventures, or is that because it's Adventurers League that's a certain style? I don't know where.
That's a double-edged sword. I guess both will have, because for me, I'm very, very thankful. I'm not a writer, but I'm more on process management. So yeah, any manuals, those are the things that I understand, and that's why I love D&D, because they tell you what to do and certain so forth. But when Adventurers League came out with this community-created content guide, how to write, and then where to put the what's this intro, the flow of the adventure, and then part 1, part 2, conclusion, monsters, and so forth. It made it easier for someone who, like me, who's not a professional writer, to write an adventure that many people can understand because they know the format, they're familiar with it. Is that the best format out there? I don't think so. I think there's something better. But if you're starting out, that's already a huge help. And even with that format, it's not bad. It's understandable. It's good. But from there, you can, as you grow as a writer, you know already what to tweak, where to put. And you know what? Maybe I'll put this section on top instead of the bottom. And you get to grow and you meet more people who are into the same thing, and that's how you get your connections and you build more products into DMsGuild.
Yeah, I think even if you aren't writing for the Adventurers League, I've not done very much stuff with them, at least having a look at their format guides and their content creation advice is very useful. It's amazing how many ways there are to phrase make a saving throw.
Yeah.
And if you go back through your adventures and realize I've phrased this 20 different ways, and having that style guide, that content guide to hand is at very least very useful for those more, I mean, as Paul was saying, the more technical manual side of writing D&D stuff.
It's true.
So we've talked. You go on there, Paul.
Sorry, I'm talking more coming from a journalism background. So being able to come in and see that there's already a standard set by the Adventurers League. I'm not too creative with my writing, but coming from a kind of more logical standpoint and being able to see that standard there, it makes it easier to write and put my creativity on the page. So I would always recommend to anyone who's starting off to have a look over it, because it makes it really easy to see what the standard should be. And as Paul says, you can start branching off from there after that.
Cool. So one of my niggles with the DMs Guild is I like physical print products. I like a physical book, and the print on demand selection is limited. How does that affect your decision making on what you're making? Does it even come into it at all? I suppose would be the kind of key question. But if it does, how important is print for those who like physical books? I'm going to be picking you, Josh.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think print products generally sell better because people like to have things on their bookshelves. I think that the guidelines that you have to follow to get a print-on-demand option on the DMs Guild are somewhat opaque. I think they've changed since the inception of the guild, and I think probably they continue to change behind the scenes. I don't necessarily know that print on demand is a great system in and of itself anyway, because you're somewhat, well, of course it creates beautiful things. I think the difficulty is that you're strapped in with one printer, right? So if you are struggling to get things to work with Lightning Source, which is the printer that DMsGuild uses, then sorry, that's that. And because you're using the Wizards IP, that also means it has to go through, well, at one point it was Lisa, I'm not sure if it still is, but that means that every communication you would have with the printer it's got another step before it comes back to you, right? So it was a lot of time and effort for Lisa to do, for example, Monsters of the Guild, right? That was a very big hardcover print on demand project, and it took like 3 or 4 of us on the layout side working with Lisa and with Lightning Source to get that done, and it took months and months and months, right? Whereas if you're publishing your own thing, you can just send it off to your local print shop and have a chat with them, and they'll say, oh yeah, we can do that, this is how you do it. You know, if you can't do it, send us the files and we can do it, or find a layout person to do it for you. Is there a word for layout person that's not layout person? It feels weird. Like
layout
editor.
artiste?
Layout artiste, yeah, perhaps.
Layout designer?
Yeah, maybe designer. I feel like designer is a good one. So if you, as a publisher, are thinking, I want my products in print, I would suggest that DMs Guild is probably not the place to start. You know, that I think that's just the fact of it. They're catered to, it's a digital marketplace, and they cater to that.
Yep. If
you get print on demand, you know what, that is great. I'm really happy for you, because you've been chosen essentially. And I think that's just the way it is. I tried to circumnavigate with Call from the Deep. I got a slap on the wrist. I'm not going to do it again. You know, that's just how things are, I think.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that in general? Other than
Well,
Josh's
for
lap the wrist,
me,
obviously.
yeah, like what Josh said, it takes months and months to do.
Yeah.
It's a whole different monster that you have to deal with when you create a product in DMsGuild. So for me, it makes it difficult to take that step to create a bigger product that's worthy of print on demand. And then now with the process in DMsGuild, it has to be approved first. They have to see if they have to approve it first, and they don't approve a lot now. They don't do that. That has changed. So now, is it worth it to create this big product that I want to be a POD, but am I going to risk it? What if it doesn't get approved? And then if it does get approved, I have to do all these steps that I'm not familiar with, that I might fail, and then basically there's not a lot of support system on this print on demand step, and that's what's make it difficult for a creator like me who just self-publish stuff to leap onto that. So I stay on the PDF grass, drink my iced tea, and have fun.
And I hope you have a very nice filing system for all of your PDFs, because I lose things all the time.
I was gonna say, so I've never been involved. I don't think I've been involved in a print on demand project that I've actually had my hands on just yet. I think I've got like one coming out like on drive through. But I think the appeal of just being able to hold something that has your words in them, I think, like, I don't know, I'd like to get sentimental. It's a case of like you can go to someone like, oh, I did some writing. Here's the book that I physically did some writing for. You can't really walk in with like all these PDFs.
Right.
You can carry your hard disk around with you, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's not
really as impressive to get a USB out and go, I'm writing.
And again, if you walk around with like a USB or a hard drive, I think people are going to ask the wrong questions.
Very much.
It's a very nice feeling because I do some journalism work and I've got some books. Being able to go into a shop and see your stuff on the shelf is a very satisfying feeling, I must say.
Mm.
And I think, I like physical products. It doesn't mean I actually read them, I hasten to add. But I like physical products. But it's the sort of thing that it doesn't colour my decision on what I'm buying. And given the relative success of the DMsGuild, I don't think it does either for the people who are purchasing it. But it was just one of those things that I know it may be almost a barrier to growth almost. Is there an avenue to take that into game stores? But is that where working for other third parties, whether that's Cobalt Press, whether that's Nord, whether that's whoever it is, seeing those opportunities, isn't it? Okay.
Sorry, I was going to say, I wonder if it shifted slightly now that print on demand is almost like an invite only thing, that customers see it as a sort of like not a badge of honor, but like a sort of thing, because it's almost an acknowledgement that they've had to go through all these sort of extra steps.
It's a prestige element, isn't it? Yeah. Or it could be viewed as such. Okay. So I suppose what we're saying is it doesn't really impact your decisioning. It's more about because everything else outweighs it. Right. So I've got I'm watching the clock a little bit because my child will want fed at some point, I'm sure, even though I left her food upstairs. So let's talk what isn't in scope of DMsGuild, but is in the kind of archives of D&D. Is there something that you would like to get your hands on and write for that currently isn't something you can, but has D&D's label on it somewhere? I'll start with Richard.
So I've got two answers, one of which is obvious, I think, and one of which isn't. The obvious answer is Spelljammer, and if people aren't aware of this, it's
confirmed.
It's hush you. It's what you get when you get a load of nerds, and I'm presuming maybe some psychotropics, and it's the 70s, and you think, what would be a great addition to fantasy? Psychic spaceships and hippos with shotguns. it's the weirdest D&D setting out there. I have failed to resist the temptation to add Spelljammer elements to all of my home games. And so I think that I think it's a very weird aspect of D&D. I'm not sure how marketable it is once you get beyond the nostalgia hit that some people have. But it's cool and it's weird. My less obvious opinion is, so my first experience with Dungeons and Dragons was during 4th edition, which is beloved by some, reviled by many. And 4th edition used a setting called Points of Light. The entire idea of it was to make things as generic fantasy as humanly possible. And some people didn't like that. I really enjoyed that. When I write adventures, because I'm aware that lots of people use them in home games, they insert them into their world. Unless I want to use some specific piece of lore, I try and keep things as generic and setting neutral as humanly possible. So having an entire world based around do whatever is actually quite appealing to me. Plus, I have the nostalgia for the Pantheon from back then, which is a very personal thing, I think. A Raven Queen for life.
Who else wants to talk about that?
I mean, just while it mentioned so I had a
Oh, wow. Okay.
So what was it? I had a DM run a Spelljammer game, and I didn't know about it before, and it's opened my third eye. So I am again, any day I'm ready. Just release it now. I will have an adventure out tomorrow. It will be done.
I can cut that bit out specifically, Matthew, if you want to put that somewhere else. Just tweet it every day if you want. Anyway. Anyone else?
For me, I have a soft spot for Planescape, though I must say it is kind of a love-hate one, just because I love the outer planes and all the really cool flavor of those that you can't really get with the material plane. But on the other hand, they're all tied to alignments, and I don't like the alignment system. So,
yeah, I was gonna agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's so many obviously there's a lot of weird stuff in Planescape, and a lot of stuff that they obviously just threw in just because they needed something for that plane. But there's so many cool stuff that that could be explored more there, and there's so much potential there. Especially if you had that officially on the DM's Guild, you could really dive into all of the different planes. Obviously, there's already this is the guide to Acheron and everything, so it's already allowed in the guild, but to actually dive into those things without being no, this is just me talking about this outer plane, and this isn't just Planescape. Please ignore me.
Yeah, and I agree. I also want to write something for Planescape. I'm not even going to pretend that I know a lot about D&D. I'm a Forgotten Realms baby. I only started playing regularly during 5th edition. But once I started reading about Planescape, and more specifically about the Lady of Pain, then kind of piqued my interest, and I want to write something for that. Plus all the weird stuff that Allison has been saying, that's what makes it cool. That's what makes Planescape cool, because I can add whatever weird stuff I want. There's a convenient portal out there that I can put whatever I want and make the story plausible. So I want to write something for that, if possible, if it's okay.
I'm sure at some point someone will let you do that, Paul.
Yes, someday.
Because I started with Dragonlance, so I love Draconians. I hate other parts of Dragonlance kind of just drive up the wall, but Draconians are a great monster, and I've used them in home games pretty much ever since the 80s. So it's one of these monsters that I just like the fact that they explode when you kill them. It's just cool. Anyway, right, okay. We'll start the kind of closing. So, is there anyone that you haven't necessarily shouted out for? Because I will go through this and pull out as many names as I can, that you have worked with, or you just want to give a shout out in general? Doesn't need to be a DM's Guild creator, can be anybody, and we'll include links. And I'm going to start with Mel.
Oh shit.
I can come back to you if you'd prefer.
No, that's fine. I was gonna shout out to Kat Evans, who she was part of the trilogy I wrote with for Adventures League, our Adventures with trilogy, and we've worked together on Uncaged and various other things. She's really cool. Ashley Warren, we've mentioned a bajillion times, but she was great. Paige Lightman, she's written for Adventures League and various other bits and pieces. She's also just an excellent person and wants to be as amazing as it can be. And I think everyone should love her forever. Those are the only people I can think of off the top of my head, but I think it's a pretty good trilogy.
It is. Right, I'm going to go in a different order. I'm going to go to Richard next.
Ooh, gosh. Off the top of my head, I don't really have anyone. I kind of fell out of DMsGuild creation for a couple of years for various reasons, and so I don't really have anyone fresh to mind. There's certainly been a lot of names mentioned today that I'm going to have to look up, though. So
outside of DMsGuild and RPG writing in general, is there anyone that you would want to highlight?
It's by sudden panic. Oh my word!
In that case,
I don't know. Maybe.
I can come back to you if you want, Richard.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. So Josh.
Yeah, so I think probably the biggest thing I'd like to mention is that Dragon Relics, this recent release, is the first time I've used sensitivity readers on a project. And just like the first time I got someone to actually edit it, it's been such an eye-opening experience, and it's really benefited it in ways that I kind of couldn't have even conceived of myself. So Curse of Sebs was one of my sensitivity readers, and another was someone who works for Salt and Sage Books. So big shout out to them for really taking that project kind of to the next level.
Cool. Thank you for that. Jason?
Big shout out to Lara Cheeseman. She's a fantastic artist, and she's only like 14 years old, and she was able to turn around a cover for one of my projects in like the space of 4 days. She is amazing. Thank you.
Fabulous. Paul?
All right. So for those who don't know, I currently live in the Philippines. So I get artists and editor locally as much as possible. So for artists, there's Camille Chua, who's done the cover for A Dragon's Breath, and her art style is just, I love it. All right. And then there's Lance Frago, created the covers for 9 Hell Adventures. Really good stuff, including the one that won a gold Emmy for organized play, Stage at Thame. So that's awesome. And then there's Ian Viernes, the one that I'm working with now for some new CCC's new projects. So really cool artists there. And then for editors, there's Angela Sabas that I work with. And I just want to say, this is a compliment, all right? This is when I handed her my draft, like print, it came back to me, it's all red. Like you will cry when you read it, but that means it's that good. So get her if you can. Same with Christoph Aliel, who's really good at editing as well, and yeah, and also Philip Aitona is the one that I'm working with right now, also in editing. So those are the people that I work with, and I really like, and they produce, from my perspective, a good work, good product. So if you can check them out, it'll be appreciated.
Cool. Allison?
If I had to shout out everyone I want to, it would be here forever.
I know, right?
So I'm just going to shout out some of my fellow Australian TTRPG writers, Luciella Elizabeth Scarlett, D.W. Dagon, and Mogi Bear Games, also known as Megan. I love them, they're great, and it's also just nice to have people in my time zone and know my suffering.
It's not that much suffering, surely.
It's 3 a.m.
Okay. Matt?
Cool. Yeah, I think I've got 4 people. So 3 people that I'm currently working on like my next adventure project with. So it's a collaboration with Ginny Loveday. She's been fantastic to work with. As well as having our editor, Sadie Lowry, incredible, really good with the words in a much better way than I am, and our artist, Liz Gist, who has been kind of all over the place with art, and they are fantastic. But then I guess last but not least is obviously Lysa, who obviously makes so much, and I don't think the community would be the same way it would be if we didn't have them at the helm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, is that giving you enough time, Richard? No.
To unmute myself. Oh, no, I think everyone I would want to mention has already been shouted out, fortunately.
Okay, fabulous. Right, okay. So I'm going to say thank you, and I'll go into the marketing spiel from a convention perspective. So this video is for the online charity role-playing game convention AlbaCon. It's going to be held on the 3rd and 4th of October. All money raised will be going to It's Good to Give, who provide amazing support to young cancer patients and their families. You can find out more about that on our website, www.albacon.uk. So I want to say thank you and goodbye to our DMsGuild round table. So you can all say goodbye and thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Excellent. Right, okay, so we will stop.